Greetings, everyone. My name is Lebogang. I would like to thank you for coming and joining our webinar today. I would just like to introduce our host, Dr. Didi Mkwanazi. He graduated with Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery at the University of the Free State in 2007 and holds an advanced university diploma in Occupational Health at University of Free State in 2016. Completed certificate in travel medicine, vets, and SA Society of Travel Medicine in 2017. He is certified as an ergonomic risk assessor from 2019. Dr. Mkwanazi further obtained his Master's of Science in Medicine under the Exposure Science at Wits University in 2023. He is the Managing Director at Corporate and Industrial Medical Consultants and OccuClinic. He's currently appointed as an occupational medical practitioner at the University of Johannesburg, VKB Group of Companies, and MPEC Gibela Trains Consortium and Life Health Solutions. Colleagues, I think we can hear from the introduction of the host that we are indeed going to be learning a lot today. So enjoy the webinar. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Palmer. Can I confirm if you can hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
All right.
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you very much. Welcome, everybody. My name is Dr. David Mkwanazi. This session is presented by the Occupational Health and Exposure Sciences Academy in partnership with CIMC, Corporate and Industrial Medical Consultants, Ergonomics, and NGB Consulting Services. Before we start, I would like to go through the house rules. Number one, this session is accredited for CPD by Health Professions Council of South Africa, HPCSA, for medical practitioners and environmental health practitioners. Each person who will join for at least an hour will get 1 CPD point for every hour that they spend online during this session, and 1 additional point for a questionnaire that we are going to post online on our website after the session. In order to get your CPD points, please remember to WhatsApp your details, your registration number, full names, and an email address to 0645203301 or the email that was listed in the invite. That is occupclinic@outlook.com. The second one is, please, if you are unable to send your details there, you can just quickly go to the chat box and drop the same details, your MP number or EHP number with your emails and email address. Somebody will capture it and you'll get your CPD points. Please mute your mics at all times for a smooth presentation and to minimize the distractions. Please ensure, especially for HPCSA members who need to get points, please make sure that you do not join under an alias or a nickname, because we need to verify your presence for the entire hour of the presentation or more. Number 5, Each session will be podcasted for later in the next day or so. So anybody who was not able to attend today will be able to access the podcast and still be able to get CPD points after taking up the quiz. And please remember that you need to obtain at least 70% from the quiz in order to get allocated CPD points. Each session, we are going to host 3 sessions today. Each session will last for about 20 minutes and we'll have a 10-minute session after each and every presentation. The questions can be typed in the chat box in the meantime during the presentation, and we'll attend to your questions during the question and answer sessions. Please contact us afterwards if you have any questions for the ergonomist or the nursing consultant. You are welcome to send us an email on the same email address provided for your questions to be answered. We'll be more than happy to forward them to the relevant person. And lastly, please enjoy the session. Colleagues, my role is just to give you the introduction of what ergonomics regulations are and what they are about. This is a set of regulations that were developed by the South African government, particularly the Department of Labor and Employment. I think it's called Employment and Labor now. It is based on the Section 43 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act, and it was gazetted officially in 2019. And the purpose is to guide occupational health and safety and healthcare workers on the management of ergonomics in the workplace, as well as the employers and many other stakeholders who are involved. Employers, occupational health and safety personnel, employees, Department of Labor officials are all addressed in this document, and they are all responsible for making sure that the South African industry or companies comply with these regulations. Employers need to make sure that, based on Occupational Health and Safety Act, Section 8, as we may recall, they are responsible for the health and safety of all the employees. Occupational health and safety personnel are responsible for enforcing and for making sure that everybody adheres to the rules. Employees are always responsible for their safety, and the Department of Labor officials are also responsible for making sure that regulations and laws are adhered to. Just a brief breakdown of the ergonomic regulations that were published in 2019. We have about 12 regulations in this document. And by the way, the document can be obtained free of charge online as a guidance for all the stakeholders that are responsible for making sure the workplaces are healthy and safe. The first one is usually definitions of certain terms that are introduced for the first time or that are not commonly used in a normal language. We have, under that section, particularly, we have a competent person who is, by definition, somebody that has knowledge and training and experience and sometimes qualifications in handling ergonomics-related risk management, risk assessment, and medical surveillance. So when we talk about a competent person, we talk about somebody who is properly qualified, properly experienced, and has enough knowledge to be able to execute tasks of that nature. The second regulation deals with the scope of the employer or self-employed person who may expose other people to ergonomics hazards. The third regulation deals with the responsibility that the employers have to establish training programs on ergonomic risk management and risk assessments. The fourth regulation outlines the duties of everybody who's exposed to ergonomic risks in the workplace. The fifth regulation outlines the duties of employers, designers, manufacturers, importers, and suppliers of equipment that may pose ergonomic hazards in the workplace. So as you can see, this does not only apply to employers, people who are responsible for providing certain equipment or importing certain tools in the workplace are also responsible under these regulations. And then the sixth one outlines the responsibilities of employers in performing ergonomic risk assessments, and usually before any work commences. It also outlines how often this must be done and the contents of such ergonomic risk assessments that have to be carried out in the workplace. The seventh regulation deals with the risk control that the employer and manufacturers, importers that are responsible for, and making sure that they remove or reduce ergonomic risks and hazards in the workplace according to the hierarchy of controls. The eighth regulation deals with the medical surveillance that is supposed to take place in the workplace, specifically pertaining to ergonomics, which should include initial medical assessments, periodic medical assessments, and exit medical assessments, meaning that ergonomics must be featured in the medical surveillance program that employers have in their workplaces. And they must also address risks and hazards at different phases of employment. When employee is hired for the first time, during the course of his employment, and at the end of his employment. The ninth regulation deals with maintenance and control that the employer and self-employed people have in making sure that the controls are adhered to. The 10th regulation deals with record keeping, specifically mentioning that records must be kept for 40 years, as we normally do within the occupational health environment. The 11th regulation deals with ergonomics, health and safety technical committees that the chief inspector must set up as soon as these regulations are in place. And lastly, the 12th one deals with the sanctions and punishments that will be imposed on people who are not abiding by these regulations. And I can specifically mention that it may carry up to 2 years of imprisonment or a fine not exceeding 200 rands that will be imposed on employers or guilty persons for each and every day that they contravene the regulations on. Ladies and gentlemen, in this session of today, we are going to specifically focus on 3 aspects of these regulations: the ergonomic risk assessment, the ergonomic medical surveillance, and the management of work-related upper limb disorders in the workplace. Please join me as we welcome our guest presenter, the first presenter of the day from Ergonomics, Mr. Dale Kennedy. This is the person who taught me ergonomics back in 2019. He holds a Master's of Science in Ergonomics. He is the current CEO and lead ergonomist at Ergonomics Pty Limited. He is South Africa's first certified professional ergonomist. He's also developed ergokinetics risk calculators and vehicle risk calculators for mining. He sits in the CF Committee for Work-Related Compensation Funds Committee for Work-Related Upper Limb Disorders. guidelines. He's registered with South African Institute of Safety and Health. She's a member of Ergonomics Society of South Africa, and he's also a certified occupational health and safety professional. Mr. Kennedy is an ergonomic consultant who has done extensive ergonomic work in South Africa and Africa. He's presented and authored many papers on ergonomics. He's also lectured and was involved in course development in ergonomics, particularly at the University of Cape Town and Varsity College previously. Please, let's welcome Mr. Dale Kennedy. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. I've also asked my colleague Sarah, who has joined us, who is actually just a slight amendment, is now the new lead ergonomist in Ergonomics. I've taken a bit of a backseat there, so she is available on the chat group if you've got some questions while I'm talking. I just need to please have permission to share my screen with you guys. I just can't seem to share my screen, so I'm not too sure, Doctor, how I can go about doing that.
I've given permission to share, sir.
So then where, sorry, I don't work with Zoom, so you're just going to have to guide me. Where is the button to share?
Please look for a green button somewhere at the bottom.
No, I don't see. That's what I don't have. I did email you my presentation, Doc, unless you want to maybe just open it on your side and share it. I just, there's no place for me. I'm now viewing Mildred's screen.
Okay, Mildred, may I please ask you to stop sharing?
Dale, I can also share for you. It seems on my side that I could share.
Sarah?
Are you able to share?
Yes, let me just get it up and then let's see if it works on my side.
Okay, Sarah, please go ahead. Thank you.
Why doesn't it?
We just can't share.
So I'm just getting it started.
All right, not a problem. Take your time.
Excellent. There we go. Thank you, Sarah. Hopefully you guys can all see that now. I can see it this side.
Yes.
All right, great. So I'll start. Say you'll probably know when to change, but if you can just go ahead and change it. Anyway, all right. So just to summarize the ergonomic regulations, guys. So I'm not going to spend too much in-depth time with anything, but obviously a company will have to have an ergonomics component to their occupational health and safety program. So what we need to understand with this regulation is it is not a prescriptive piece of regulation. So in the likes of occupational hygiene, you will have the easiest example is noise, and it'll say measure the noise, and if it's over 85 decibels, then this is what you have to do. This regulation says you need to monitor and manage the ergonomic risks in your company. How you do that and the tools that you use are up to your discretion. All right, as long as these tools that you're using are valid, they are applicable to your organization, and obviously they are addressing the ergonomic risks. So that's why it is written as an ergonomics program, all right? So that does cause a bit of controversy because people go like, what tools do I use, and am I doing the right thing, am I not? But at the end of the day, it helps you because it doesn't box you into a certain tool development. There is a need for the person that is doing the ergonomics risk to show, like on the sliding scale, like I say, if you're going to do that, if that headache doesn't go away, you go to a doctor, and if the doctor can't help you, go to ergonomic regs. If you want to do it yourself, by all basic knowledge and training,
Dale, can you hear me? Hello, Dale.
I think we have lost Dale. Let me just have a look quickly.
Okay.
Are you
Hi,
there,
guys.
Dale?
Can you hear me? Yeah, well, I don't know what happened. It crashed. All right. Am I back?
Yes, you are.
All right, cool.
Yes, you are.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So what I was saying is there has to be some sort of basic level of competency that you will have to show. So like you said, you've done a 3-day course, or you've done part of ergonomic risk assessment in your um, in your degree that you've done. All right, that risk assessment, the controls you put in place, etc., are obligated to participate in the risk assessment and report ergonomic-related discomforts and potential injuries. All right, and then, as we said, the suppliers, manufacturers have to consider ergonomics, and there's medical surveillance. So what people often miss is the suppliers and manufacturers. So you guys, especially in the office environment, you are well within your rights to request the ergonomic certification or what ergonomics has been considered in the office chairs that you buy, all right? And it's up to the supplier and manufacturer to provide that information for you. If it is shown that their product is the reason that your employees are getting hurt, then they need to come in and do a risk assessment on their product that they've installed in your company and let you have that risk assessment, right? So it is quite an important point. And in the medical surveillance, obviously, there will be another party chatting about that. If you can click next there. Safe. The next slide, please. I'm going to read it to you. Okay. The definition is that it is a scientific discipline. And what people miss is it means that you've got to collect the data and let the data show you where the risk is. Okay. So it's not your opinion of whether you think that the task is hard or heavy, or should I rate it as a 3 or a 1. You've got to collect data and then plug that data into the risk tool and let the risk tool then tell you, is there a risk? That data is the data of the task, but also a key component that many tools are missing is the data on the human that is doing the job. All right. And a lot of the international tools out there don't do this. They go and say, and they're all very, very good tools. Please don't misinterpret me. But if you take like the rulers, the Reba, the NIOSH, all that does is says 10% of the population can lift this load, and that doesn't help us. And especially in Africa, where we are reliant on manual labor, we certainly need to understand the size and the shape of the people that are doing the job as well, right? And then we use that data of the person and the task to look at how they interact to optimize the well-being, their well-being, and overall system performance. Okay, so we are looking to streamline the production of whatever, but that streamlining is done not from a fiscal point of view, it's done from a human movement point of view. Okay, so the safer we make the task, the harder the people can work with the less a risk of injury. Okay, and therefore that will improve the system performance. So if we look here, if we go, what are the factors that we consider? It's employee wellness, human behavior, mental work demands, the workstation, work physiology, you name it, it's all there. All right? Just, I think it cycled too quickly there. But if you have an incorrect match in your system performance, that's where you have your injury, your absenteeism rates, you're not realizing the profits that the company wants, and now we're looking on a global scale, right? If obviously the greater that match is, the more sustainable the business, and obviously the more predictable the profits are going to be, etc., etc. But you can see when we start talking of the lighting, and if the lighting's poor, then errors increase because people can't distinguish color correctly in the night, right? And that's a physiological aspect to our eyes, and we are no different whether we are boy or a girl or pink or blue. There's a physiological process that takes place, and if the lighting is poor, we're not going to interpret the color correctly, and we could make mistakes. So the lighting plays an important role, but also the persons. If we stick to the lighting and the color example, what do you associate different colors with? So like I know in China, blue is often associated with go, okay, not green. So can you imagine we get to China and there's a blue robot? We wouldn't know what to do, okay? So there's different things like that. Red often denotes hot, danger, it could mean off, but maybe other cultures perceive red as a different thing. So even that small thing of the color that we use in our design could affect system performance. Okay, so let's go. No, yeah, I've just spoken about that. Okay, so if we look at the operator, okay, and this is the key factor that, like I said, many of the ergonomic risk tools that are available are missing, okay? We have to look at the human as part of a system. In other words, you don't just get a back injury. What is going on that has led to that injury, all right? And from an ergonomics perspective, it could be either three main factors. It could be the human operator or the behavior of that person, right? Which is a key component, right? We could design the best engineering computer workstation factory layout, but if the people are doing something silly, then they're going to land up getting injured. All right. So this is a key factor: the human operation and behavior. We then look at the environment that they're working in, because the environment could be causing that injury, right? And that could be, like I said, the poor lighting, the air quality, poorly designed system, whatever the case may be. But that also could all be good. So you could have a happy, healthy human behaving correctly, a great working environment, but the work demands, so the stress imposed on that person are too great, right? So in other words, faulty internet, Eskom's lights going out all the time, a boss screaming at you all the time, you can't meet your quotas, management haven't reduced your quota to compensate for the loss of 2 hours of electricity every day. So now you're working harder overtime on a Sunday or whatever the case may be. That could lead to the injury. So we look at all of this. I think say click, because I think these balls are going to move. And yeah, so we look at all of those factors, and then we'll say, right, is this actually a work-related issue, or is it something else? All right, and it speaks to the work-related upper limb disorder as well, and which is quite a prescriptive piece of regulation, right? Which should also be working hand in hand with the ergonomic regulation as well. Okay, next one. So when we look at ergonomic risk assessment, all right, it means that we have to have a program in place for your company, all right? And that program is a process or a way to investigate, identify, analyze, evaluate, and prioritize your risk, okay? And at the moment, things tend to be quite reactive, right? We go, we've got a lot of back injuries in this department, so let's get an ergonomist in to come assess, all right? What we try and do is say, hey, hold on, let's move you to the advanced, where we predict and we can say, right, based on the data that we have got in this department, in 3 years' time, all the employees in this department, for a basic example, are going to be over the age of 55. We are going to expect a greater risk of injury. We are going to expect a greater need for recovery and rest breaks. And we can start becoming more intelligent with our ergonomics risk, but that's obviously on the other side of the curve, on the advanced side, right? But what we're trying to achieve with this piece of regulation is being preventative, okay? But we can't move from preventative to proactive to advanced without any data, okay? And that's the key that we try and achieve at Ergonomics, is to say, we're going to collect data, okay? Because the more data we have in your workplace, the more we can move to proactive and advanced things. And if we did our jobs very correctly, then our learned doctor that is hosting this course won't have a job, right? Because nobody would get injured. But the point being, obviously, people will be injured, right? But we can obviously try and prevent many of that. So in a nutshell, the basic, if we get through all the words and interpretation of the regulation is just a means and a way to prevent musculoskeletal disorders in the workplace. Okay, and that's kind of the bottom line, or cutting through all the nonsense. Next slide, Seth. So what we've done is we need to obviously ensure that people understand what we mean by ergonomic risk, all right? Because your risk lies in all three of the domains. And I can assure you guys, if you're only doing a physical ergonomic risk assessment, the chair height, the screen distance, the keyboard, whatever, the box the person's lifting, and you're not looking at the cognitive and organizational, all right, you're running the risk that the DEL will reject the ergonomic risk assessment because you've ignored two factors, and you're not doing a thorough ergonomic risk assessment. And we are finding, especially with a manually intensive labor that is actually overweight and starting to be quite aged, right? A lot of the organizational and cognitive factors are much more prominent in deducing whether something is a risk than the physical work that people are doing. Okay, so when you've got an industry that is relying on a lot of women, let's say, that are all 50, 55, a lot of them have blood sugar problems, associated BMI, premenopausal, they can get a lot of musculoskeletal injuries simply because of they don't have enough rest breaks at work. And it has nothing to do with the physical side of it. It's got to do with the organizational side. Okay, so it's a bit technical to describe in this short time, but as long as your risk assessment is covering these three domains, you're good to go. All right, Seth? So if we look, obviously, I've developed this ergokinetics risk assessment tool that we use extensively throughout Africa. In fact, some international companies are starting to take up, where we actually look at the human and the task. Okay, so like I said, a lot of historical ergonomic tools don't even consider the person doing the job. All right, and we take, you always pick on NIOSH. So we say a 20 kilogram load under these conditions, you should only lift 7 kilograms. Only 10% of your staff can handle that. Which 10%? Are they the boys or are they the girls? In deducing this 10%, have they built in South African anthropometry and South African strength values, South African physiological values? Probably not. So it is a very good tool, but how applicable is it? So I pride myself on saying, well, let's collect human data as well. So let's go to the next slide. So I'm going to show you the equation we use. So in a nutshell, to try and make it make sense to people, is when we look at something and say this is an ergonomic risk, we will look at the human and their functional capacity. And that could be, we can build on that, right? We can build on their back strength, their grip strength, their resting heart rate, their blood pressure, whatever you want to chuck into that little part of the cooking pot, we could. Right now, for a basic risk assessment, we look at age, height, weight, BMI, and exposure history. Okay, and that gives us an idea of the size and the shape of the person. Right? So we look at that person. We then add that person's score to what they actually physically have to do. All right. And in the task organization, that's when do they start? How many rest breaks do they have? Is there good communication with the supervisors, etc., etc. We look at what postural requirements are involved, and how long do they have to hold those postures, etc. We look at the cognitive variables, so like, have they under stress? Do they understand their job? Do they feel fatigue? Stuff like that. And then we have an answer, and this answer could be, let's say, 20. We then look at how long are they exposed to these job factors. So is it lifting a bag of cement for 20 minutes in a day, while that 20 then gets reduced to a 10? If that lifting a bag of cement occurs for 6 hours of the 8-hour shift, that 20 then gets skewed up to a 60-50, and it's a higher risk. So the duration multiplier has a critical component to play in ergonomic risk, right? Because I can tell you, I could ask you all now to hold a glass of water with your arm extended straight out to the side and ask you to hold it there for an hour. You are lifting, by all means, you're lifting an insignificant weight that you can lift every day and never get fatigued. But the longer you hold your arm out straight, the sore your shoulder's going to get before you eventually have to put that glass down. So duration is a key component. Okay, Sarah, thanks. So that's kind of what it looks like in a nutshell, is that we will look at, if you look at the top left of your screen, that's the human data we take. It's by no means it's by no means encompasses all human data, right? If we find we've gone there and many of the staff have a high BMI, we then will recommend that the clinic or the company consultants, whatever, go do a percentage body fat test and say, are these actually a lot of big, strong guys and girls, or are they a lot of overweight people, all right? But it just gives us an idea of their age, their weights, their heights, and obviously their BMI. We then plug in the task variables. This is the data we talk about, where you actually measure the reach, you measure the distance that they move the load, you count the number of reps they do in a minute, you measure their heart rate, and it's all color coordinated. So whatever goes red, and at the bottom it will self-write itself, and it will tell you what is wrong and stuff. And it will start every time you plug in one of the data points, so the little graph will get built up and up and up and up. Okay. And these calculators get quite advanced, because obviously before it scores, let's say, the heart rate, it will look at the age, the BMI, what load is being lifted, how often is it lifted and stuff, and it will portion, right? Because you can have a higher heart rate for a shorter task. Okay, so I'd like to say in inverted brackets, it's an intelligent system, because it's not just going A equals B, so therefore C. It's going to say A equals B, but what about E, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K? Then make it equal C. Okay, so this is what I've spent my life developing, my 24 years so far, figuring out the best way to present ergonomic risk. I think that's near the end. Say one more slide, I think. And then, yeah. So this is just obviously on the right there is the office version. What you saw there was a lifting version. But what we do is we do offer that training course that the doctor's been on. All right. Typically, if we come into your company and there's more than like 5 or 10 people, we can do it on-house as a physical course. But we have a monthly course running online. There is the ErgoTrack course out there with another supplier who is, I can't think of his name offhand now, but he does all the ErgoTrack stuff. That is another course that you are welcome to go do, but it's really just a basic course. My advice is, if you've never been exposed to ergonomics, do the ErgoTrack and then come do our risk auditors course, but we can take you through from matric level and get you going. All right, and then obviously we do have that ergonomics, the ergokinetic software that I've developed that we will give to you if you do the training. Okay, so the next slide, I think that's it. Yeah, so what is important, and this is just to summarize, the next slide is just a thank you, obviously we'll go there now, but is that when you're looking at ergonomics, you've got to look at the environment. And if you're only looking at the environment, you're missing half the story, like 1 or 2/3 of the story. Because like I said, that environment could be great, okay? But your employee could be severely overweight with comorbidities. And the key thing you need to understand is, if an employee presents with a diagnosis of carpal tunnel, right, And we're not here to say it's not carpal tunnel. I mean, that's not our job, right? The doctors do that. But if they're diagnosed with carpal tunnel, we've got to look as an ergonomist, why? Is it the repetitions they're doing? Have they just had a baby? Have they got high blood pressure? Because all of those other factors can lead to carpal tunnel. It's not just because I work on a keyboard and got carpal tunnel, now it's the keyboard's fault. Okay, so we have to look at the employee and employee history, but then what we also have to look at is what is that employee doing? All right, so let's take carpal tunnel. If they are an avid horse rider, okay, but they got carpal tunnel, well, do you know the forces involved in holding the reins and turning and steering a horse are huge, and that could be the cause of a carpal tunnel. Okay, so, and are they taking sufficient breaks, etc., etc. So it's such a, it doesn't have to be so complicated, but it is much more involved than going, hey, they lift 20 kilograms. It says you shouldn't lift more than 23 kilograms. Oh wait, that's a safe task. Okay, because you could be lifting that 20 kilograms from your feet, from the height of your feet, and that will put your back compression, disc compression force through the roof, and you're going to have disc degeneration. Right. So there are so many things to it. That's why we would advise you to do some sort of ERAC out course, because it just highlights how involved it is. But the tool, we build all that complexity into the tool to make your jobs as easy as possible. Okay. I think that's it there. So I think we're just going to next slide. Thank you. Yeah. All right. And then, just thank you for the opportunity, guys. Sarah is also available for chats as well. Like I said, she is Ergomax's lead ergonomist now, and much more clever than me with ergonomics. So I'm sure she can answer some of your questions as well as I can. All right. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you very much, Dale. That was very informative and enlightening. I have a couple of questions, and while we've just come out of the presentation, fresh from the presentation, Sabelo Twala wanted to know how long is the course? What is the duration of the course?
So our course is 3 days long. All right. I know I have had clients come in and have done, because we run them monthly, they did 1 day, 1 month, the next day, and the next month, the next day, etc., etc. We can break it up like that. But typically 99% of the people do the 3 days. It's online. We can send the booking form link. It's about 14,000 Rand a person. You get the software for free with it for a year. And then I think it's 550 Rand thereafter to use the software, license it. But again, you're not beholden to that software, right? It's the course, you will have your certification. It will last you for your life. You don't have to come repeat the course over and over again. But yeah, 3 days.
All right, thank you. I would also like to mention that ever since I've done the course in 2019, I've been doing economic risk assessments with ease. I totally understand what's necessary, and I understand now what the fuss is about, having to learn ergonomics and be able to perform these risk assessments. And remember, ergonomics can have both a qualitative kind of an assessment where you just spot the hazards, and with the software that Dale has just referred to, the ergokinetic software, you are able to actually put a number to it. You can actually calculate the level of risk that the employee is exposed to based on their own physical characteristics, work environment characteristics, and the work itself. Dale, I have another question. Can you please briefly summarize some of the topics that are covered in the course, maybe 2 or 3 that you think are very important?
Hi all, I'm just going to speak on behalf of Dale. So the course, it's essentially broken up into 3 days. So the first day kind of serves as an introduction. As we kind of Dale ran over today, there's actually quite a lot of different things that you can look at and to consider to really like put your ergonomics cap on when you do your risk assessment. So day 1 is pretty much just giving that strong foundation of what ergonomics is, what does it mean, and where does it truly benefit, and how is it applicable in the African context, because that's something that I think gets ignored far too often. And then the second day we kind of go into specifically manual materials handling. So to kind of keep it quite basic, we effectively go into the science behind lifting. What does it mean to lift heavy? What does heavy even mean? What can the body actually tolerate when it comes to manual handling? We also do work-related upper limb disorders. So we go over the Circular Instruction 180 regulation. What does the compensation process actually look like? What do some of the common upper limb disorders look like? And essentially, what can one do to try and be proactive and prevent those, particularly with Circular Instruction 180 being there and being what it is. And then day 3 is it goes into the whole office ergonomics side of things. So that's essentially the main components. I have put my email address in the chat. So if anyone is interested in the course, please you're more than welcome to reach out to me, and I can just send you our course brochure as well, which I think would be quite informative on, more of the details of what the course entails.
All right, thank you very much, Sarah. I noticed that there is another question, but if you would like to stay for after the next session or two to be able to answer that, it will be highly appreciated.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Colleagues, please allow me to welcome our next speaker, Sister Angela Butkovic, also affectionately known as Sister Angie. Has a Bachelor of Occupational Health Nursing from Wits-Tech, now called University of Johannesburg, Bachelor of Nursing Education from University of Johannesburg, Masters of Occupational and Environmental Health Nursing from Wits University. She's the MD at NGB Consulting Solutions. She's a member of South African Society of Occupational Health Nursing and International Committee on Occupational Health, International Commission on Occupational Health. She's a current national PR for Sashon and volunteer Gauteng Regional Committee member. Previously associate lecturer at Wits University for Occupational Health. Previously training facilitator at OXA Center of Excellence. I think our occupational health nursing colleagues will remember OXA. She has done extensive work as an occupational health nursing provider in various industries. And in summary, she's a seasoned occupational health nurse consultant and a creative nurse educator. Sister Angie, take it away, please.
Good evening, everybody. I thought, let me show you what I look like today. That's actually my LinkedIn profile picture. Thank you so much, Dr. Mkwanazi, for that very elaborate introduction, I wanted to say. Like you said, I'm Sister Angie. That's how people know me, remember me, and I see a couple of familiar names in the audience. So without further ado, and I wanted to say, Dr. Mkwanazi, you promoted me there on a couple of of items. I was the national PR at Sashon. I'm now working predominantly on the regional side, and yes, thanks. And then going into the International Commission of Occ Health. That's where my consulting's heading. So I hope that my task today has been to share with you the medical surveillance side of things. Hopefully you'll be able to see. I'm just trying to share screen quickly. Okay. Does everybody see the that little bit? It's called a prezi.com. Let's make that a little bit wider. There we go. Dr. Mkwanazi, are you able to see the presentation?
Yes, sister, thank you.
Okay, awesome. Okay, I'm going to rely on you just to let me know. All right, so I understand we've got quite a mix of colleagues in the audience, and I was tasked to focus on the surveillance side. So just to introduce, let's go forward now. That's the title. There we go. Okay, there we go. So it takes a team to get the occupational health surveillance program designed and up and going. As you can see, I've put a few of the associations that are involved in this. And a lot of it is risk-based, and that's where we rely on our colleagues from SIO and SIOSH and the Ergonomics Society of South Africa. We often, so I'm going to call on or refer to what's happening internationally before I head to what has been regulated in South Africa. So ICO has referred to the medical program as occupational health assessments since 2010. Our legislation still yet to catch up. We still refer to them as medicals. And even as Dale and Dr. Mkwanazi had alluded to, we, in our regulation 2019 for ergonomics, still refer to it as medical surveillance. So I'm going to start introducing you guys to new concepts. The Occupational Health Surveillance Program is designed, implemented, managed, and evaluated by an occupational health practitioner. That can either be the doctor or the nurse. And that doctor needs to be a medical officer with additional specialization in OC Health at an NQF level 8 and registered with HPCSA. This is important because many of your OSH, the Act itself and the regulations refer to an occupational health practitioner. That means you can rely on either. But I find that the employers don't always necessarily understand the intricacies of that, and they might rely on the local GP down the road, which is where you find later on that your wellness programs are not actually addressing what you need in respect of today's topic, ergonomics. So according to the and to provide diagnoses and to co-manage abnormalities with the OC Health practitioner, the nurse practitioner. On the other side, the nurse practitioner is not just the professional nurse that came out of the hospital with a bit of primary health care. She has to have her specialization in OC Health and this has been changed recently since 2015, at an NQF level 8, and that extra qualification needs to be registered with SANC. The OHN's role is to conduct those health assessments, most of them. And in many cases, when you've got high-risk employees, for instance, drivers, the mining industry, and so on, then it can only be the doctor. The OHN, one of our other big roles, is to case manage those abnormal outcomes with the multidisciplinary input of the doctor, the OT, the physio, and many, many allied professionals, including the ergonomist and the kinesist and so on. We manage the program because often enough our OHMPs are on site maybe once or twice a week, and so the OHN deals with the normals until we pick up somebody who is deteriorating or needs a referral. We generate those progress reports and we trend and analyze the occupational health surveillance program. So yes, just a quick note that, as I alluded to, there has been developments in the qualifications, and it's important to realize that both the legacy qualifications for the doctors and nurses, the postgraduate ones, relied on an introduction to ergonomics. So the only way that we've been able to up our skills is to attend courses like Dale Kennedy's one, and one's run by NIH and overseas. So it is, if there are colleagues here in the audience who are doctors and nurses, please, I encourage you to please go and get competency in ergonomics and not to rely just on your awareness training. All right. And that's going to help us shaped by the following factors. There's a huge medical legal framework, and internationally, ICO is the International Commission of Occ Health, determine the guidelines and international standards that we should be working towards. Nationally, here in South Africa, we've got our Mines Health and Safety Act with quite a few codes of practices that tell us what needs to be in that medical surveillance program. We've got our OSH Act, and of course, with relation to our topic today, there's a growing component of ergonomics. COID also is involved in what we design in our surveillance program, because yes, it's meant to be preventative, but we are obviously at the end, when we do pick up somebody, we need to now know what to do and which ones are, which musculoskeletal, neural, and otherwise injuries or diseases that are compensatable. And we are governed by the National Health Act. Okay, not to spend too much time on that, but we can always look at more detail. It is risk-based, so we do need the input from the employer's hazard identification risk assessment. And that is often, like Dale was alluding to, a quick review. I see a computer, I see a desk, there's a risk. It needs to be more than that. You need to make sure that when you do these hires that you have invited your occupational health practitioner, your ergonomist, your hygienist, because you actually need data, like they'll say data. So there are a couple that I selected from one of my colleagues from the UK. It's the Health and Safety Executive institution there. Just be aware that sometimes it's only focusing, rating, in other words, repetitive tasks of the upper limbs, or it's only rating manual handling. And as you notice here, a lot of this seems to be physical ergonomics. Okay, there is components to the cognitive and organizational side, but yes, so use them only once you've been, trained on them. Then we've got the functional assessment, where we rely on a competent person, such as an ergonomist, an occupational therapist, a physio, or an occupational health practitioner with additional ergonomic qualifications to decide if this person is going to functionally operate as a, for instance, pregnant female on a forklift. Okay. And the last component that helps the design is a document called an occupational risk exposure profile that by our human resource officers with the occupational health practitioner and a safety professional, because it's a combination of what is the description. Okay, so just quickly, some of you might have had your medicals, and remember, not medicals anymore, they are occupational health assessments done, and it was a once-off and you never saw the doctor or nurse again. This is how it's supposed to be. Ideally, everybody is supposed to have a pre-employment assessment based on your OREM. Engineer that is going to be going around to all the mines. or you're a sales rep that has to say, drive between provinces. Each one is going to have slightly different risks, and with that, we then align or refine the physical examination and the psychological assessment. And that is to, in the pre-employment health assessment, we are looking at whether you are going to be physically and psychologically ready to do the job that you're applying for. Okay. There might be exclusion criteria. An example would be working at heights. We don't want you to get dizzy and fall off that height. So you need to have, as much as you have hypertension, diabetes, all these chronic conditions, are they controlled? Okay. Unfortunately, what often happens is people get through and they're already employed. And so we then have to look at the next health assessment, which is known as a pre-placement. You will notice in the regulations, they refer to them as initials. Or in some, in the mines, they refer to them as transfers. But they all fall under the main category of a pre-placement assessment. In other words, you're already employed, and we're looking at whether you can continue in this post, okay, this risk post. We would be doing periodics on certain workers from time to time, especially like after long periods of absenteeism, after huge ops, things like that, to make sure that you're ready to come back to work. A lot of travel health assessments are often, you know, we're focusing on where you're traveling to, but it involves a component of ergonomics. For instance, you are perhaps going to a very tropical environment for the mines, and it's middle of Africa somewhere. How are you going to handle the heat and the distances that need to be walked and so on? Okay. Another one that gets, unless you're aware of it, is all the primary healthcare complaints. We take trends from that, and obviously when the individual is standing there with us, we ask, you know, so how many times have you been having this lower back ache, or the pain in your calf, or the headache? So it's a classic one. Annuals, as the title describes, is going to happen on a regular basis, on an annual to every 2 years. And that's for us to really monitor the effect of the ergonomic risk. Okay. And in not retrospect, but as a consequence, the effectiveness of the ergonomic program in place. And of course, we need to conduct an exit occupational health assessment when one has contract has terminated, or you decide to move on to another company. And that helps both the employer and the employee to know where you are at that point of exit. All right, a little bit circular. And as we're doing these occupational health assessments, it's not always done by the occupational health practitioner. So there's a lot of self-administered questionnaires out there. And for instance, the ergonomic tools that I alluded to just now with the Mac and so on. That's just awareness, and you might come across it during wellness days. It's definitely not comprehensive enough. Okay, these are the tools that we would use, the ergonomists and the health and safety professionals that are, you know, sorry, the time is going off. So these are some of the tools, the links that I've sent to you earlier. Let's go up, not down. Hang on. There we go. And then when you come to us at the clinic, we'll be doing a full-on occupational health history, which is focused on your exposure history from even as a youngster. So childhood injuries and diseases. Okay, right up until what we have to assess in front of us today. And the more complex is when we're to actually examining your musculoskeletal, your neural system, and your psyche. Okay, so just to break that down, to give you an idea of what we're looking at in the history taking, that you don't get a fright. I often say to my clients, the very first time we meet you, it's going to take a little long, because we really need to look at the following factors that might be affecting your health today. And keep in mind, it's confidential. It remains in that client's file. The only thing that goes out to the employer and to safety, if they're needing, you know, confirmation that this person can continue at work, is the certificate of fitness. Okay. So, quick overview is that we're really going to be asking a lot of questions about your occupational exposure. This is not about how well you worked or how, you know, all the wonderful projects you accomplished in your various jobs. This is what were you exposed to in those jobs. We're going to be looking at systematic reviews, the medical factors, like I mentioned, your chronic as well as acute conditions that might have developed over the years, and like Dale was saying, your age is going to determine these things, the risk of those. So we're actually doing a health risk assessment in this history taking, and we haven't even touched you yet. Surgical, from anything from abdominal ops to obviously fractures that were repaired, that's trauma factors, and so on. We're looking at your genetic predispositions, which could be anything from osteoporosis to muscular dystrophy to anything, okay? And a big one is the psychosocial side of it, where we will most probably ask you about a little bit of economics going on, who's the breadwinner, and so on. As all of these affect your ergonomic status today as we sit together. Dale alluded to the three components of ergonomics. So when we do history taking, musculoskeletal and neural, we're actually focusing a large part of it is your physical ergonomics, the effects that physical ergonomics have had on you. Still addresses the cognitive, but less so. And the last part that we'll only be able to pick up that there's been some sort of organizational effect is when we get to your psychosocial factors and we realize that you know, things aren't going well in the workplace with regards to you know, extra shifts and so on. Okay. I just wanted to share a quick example with you, something very simple. We all tend to be working with computers today. And my question to you is, how are you carrying your bag? Okay. Very obvious here that in diagram 1, you are going to start getting a little bit of scoliosis, means a bending of the back sideways. Okay. The spine, that is. And what we do when we do that physical assessment, we look at that bag that has now you don't know there's a laptop in there or bricks or books or whatever, and we've already weighed it at 10 kilograms. So we know how much you're picking up, and we're looking at how you're picking it up. And we ask you to walk across the room. So it sounds like a silly little task, but this is exactly what we see. And that's our assessment. So giving you a little bit of insight into yeah, what kind of tasks we're going to be doing. That brings me to the first part of that musculoskeletal examination. The neural side would include us doing reflexes and just a mini mental, which is, are you orientated to what's happening around you at the moment? Okay. Because I'm limited to only 20 minutes and my time's almost up, just a quick highlight here. During our history taking, we would ask you questions about repetitive work, awkward positions, how How long are you standing versus sitting in your tasks, twisting? How often are you lifting your arms above your shoulder to do work? The height, weight, the BMI, picking up loads, pushing and pulling. Many of us are working from home. One of the things I do is I ask you to please take a picture and send it to me. And of course, that's when you sit up straight and you do what you're supposed to. And I should actually ask everyone to put your videos on today and see how you're sitting in front of the workshop. Okay, but that's what I would do too. We'd look into what hand tools you're using and how you're using it. Another one, when we're looking at a combination of your musculoskeletal and neural, is evaluating golf. Now, golf is gait. How did you walk in to the clinic is actually already an assessment. Okay, are you rolling your foot from heel to toe? Your arms. Sometimes we do passive movement, sometimes we do active movement. I had a colleague who jokingly said the union has called her in because she is making people dance in front of her. I said, why? What are you doing? And she said, no, there's too many people. So while they're waiting in the waiting room, she has got somebody, a nursing assistant, asking them to lift their hands, do it to the side, and all 5, 10 of those clients are sitting there actually doing an ergonomic assessment, and they don't realize it. So I said, well, I think you need to give a little bit of heads up before you just make colleagues do all sorts of exercises in the waiting room. So that quickly changed. That was over 20 years ago. So I thought I must just share that with you, to the colleagues that are here, especially those working in the mines. We need to move away from bulk medicals into actually individually assessing. We're going to be looking at the legs, and as you can see to the side, the legs and feet are linked. Let me just bring this over to the side here. All right, all the ladies that are in the audience here, are you still wearing high heels or are you wearing flats? Okay, we look very smart and professional. However, the amount of effect that those shoes are doing on your back, as you can see there, changes the shape of your foot. Okay, and it has an effect on the Achilles tendon, and of course the bunions that start, bunions and corns that start developing. So I often am looking at the shoes that you are wearing, and even the safety. I mean, I've quickly just used a lady shoe here, but the safety shoes are one of those things that we would be taking extra notice of. I mentioned the spine, which was where you saw the gentleman holding his bag. A sideways curvature of the spine is called scoliosis. An exaggerated spine, so if you think about a pregnant lady, she's really curved in the back, that's called lordosis, but it obviously gets better. No? And kyphosis is when there's a rounding of the upper back. Alrighty, and let's just see. And like I said, once we've gone through specifically the muscular, the neural, and the psychological assessments in more detail, we can then look at issuing you the certificate. Please note that if you are getting certificates that just say fit and they say nothing else, you need to be cautious of those, okay? It is fit according to a specific OREP. So it must elicit or highlight which OREP, which category are we declaring you fit for? And did you meet all those exclusion criteria? Now, the exclusion criteria would be determined during the time that we sit together as a team with the HR, the safety, and the occupational health practitioner, and any other specialist that's involved in that particular risk category, to say, in order for you to climb through the tunnels of a certain area in a mining industry, we need you to be below 30, a BMI of below 25. Okay. That's exclusion. Until that person can lose that weight, you will have to be working above ground. So it would be fit pending. And we've got to be very, the word is succinct, short and sweet, that we can't, give too much details, but an example would be, you'd have to lose that weight to within the harnesses safety parameters. So most harnesses will only carry up to 120 kilograms. And keeping in mind, we really don't want you to fall off the side of a height, okay? Then we've also got fit with limitations, where we know that that condition is not going to recover, but as long as you are keeping healthy within that limitation. So for instance, I quickly alluded to the fact of having diabetes, hypertension, even Dale was talking about visual limitations earlier. You can still work on a computer. There is voice activated dynamics that can help you from the physical ergonomic side of things, and cognitive. And then of course, the last part, which is not often seen, but person is aging to the extent that they no longer can walk or function in that specific, and as you noticed, we have to say not fit for a specific type of job. It doesn't mean you can't go and work in other jobs. And that, ladies and gents, because my time is up, is a very quick overview of or a quick insight into what we do with the occupational health surveillance and how the program works. Thank you to Dr. Mkwanazi for the invitation, and to colleagues for spending your evening with me tonight.
Thank you very much, sister. I can see this is very interesting because most people are still here. And I ask everybody not to go away. I see there are no questions for Sister Angie at the moment, but people are still welcome to drop them into the chat box, and then I'm going to ask Sister Angie to stay a little bit longer to be able to answer to those questions.
Will do, will do.
All right, thank you, sister. Colleagues, let's quickly go through the last part of the session. All right, this is the practical part that we often have to deal with in the occupational clinics. Usually, we would have started with a risk assessment, then medical surveillance has been done. And as you know, those two programs are meant to prevent any issues, any medical issues or ergonomic problems that may be encountered in the workplace. Occupational health is based on a prevention model. Most of what we do is aimed at preventing problems from seeping up into the clinic or being given patients that are already ill. So we focus more on prevention rather than the treatment or the cure. But as you know, it happens that somehow our preventative measures are not adequate, our controls are not adequate, and we find ourselves having ergonomic patients in our clinics. So what is work-related upper limb disorders? These are generally a collective term referring to conditions that affect upper limbs due to a couple of ergonomic hazards, such as repetitive movements, heavy lifting, contact stress, static muscle loading, pushing and pulling, awkward posture, and vibration. And usually we see evidence during our health risk assessments that people are having, the commonest one is usually repetitive movement. People are having repetitive movement, they are lifting heavy objects. Already you know that we might have to deal with ergonomic issues. And then risk can also be detected during medical surveillance. You know, if we give them those questionnaires to answer, and we are able to go back to those questionnaires to monitor the responses to the questions in the questionnaire, we'll be able to detect that certain people are exposed to certain hazards, and we'll be able to prevent that before any damage has been caused. Colleagues, the common symptoms that we often experience in the occupational clinics that are related to ergonomic strain are pain. Pain is the commonest one. Swellings and masses such as ganglions. You get people complaining of numbness, like with carpal tunnel syndromes. You get people complaining of weakness of limbs, especially after repetitive movements. I've also seen trigger fingers due to repetitive movements of certain finger joints. So these are the common symptoms that you often find in the occupational clinics that people present with. And then in terms of exposure assessments, we already have a couple of tools that we can utilize in the workplace. We have safety audits by SHEC that we can review from time to time to see if there are any issues of concern. We have IOD records. If somebody has reported a certain condition related to a certain hazard, there is a very good chance that somebody else is also going to present with the same problems. So this also gives us an opportunity to deal with it before we have many people presenting with the same problem. We have qualitative risk assessments like the medical occupational health risk assessments that the ONP will conduct. And usually in these risk assessment reports, it will be mentioned that a certain department has repetitive movement, heavy lifting or pushing or pulling. That will also give you an idea that we are dealing with ergonomics. We have a quantitative risk assessment. Sorry, that meant to say quantitative, such as the kind of risk assessments that through which you are able to measure the amount of risk that people are exposed to. So you are able to individualize specific people with a certain risk score based on their physical characteristics and work-related or environment-related characteristics. And a typical example is the program that I was telling you about that has been produced by Mr. Dale. This is a very useful tool in such instances. And then you have medical surveillance, normal medical surveillance with, I would assume or say, an ergonomic questionnaire, which most occupational health programs do not have. But sometimes you have certain questions that will be related to ergonomic hazards and so forth. This information can also help to give you an idea that we are dealing with ergonomics in the workplace. And then in terms of clinical assessment, we often start with medical history. We will go through exposure history. Whatever employees are concerned about, whatever they say they are exposed to, it's worth checking how much is the exposure and how often, and try and identify people who are involved so that you can correctly classify their risk and grade it. Sister Angie mentioned occupational risk exposure profiles. This, if the OREPs are done properly, this will also be documented in their OREPs, and that will guide you as you design the occupational health surveillance matrix. That will guide you to include ergonomic medical surveillance as part of your general medical surveillance, which is supposed to be risk-based. Clinical examination usually follows. We all know what goes into clinical examination, head-to-toe examination. This is how we manage to pick up any issues that are already affecting the employee. Remember, we started with prevention, and whenever prevention fails, certain issues will end up affecting employees, and we are still able to pick them up during medical surveillance. And then we have certain special investigations such as x-rays, but these are often not done within the occupational clinic itself. We usually refer them for certain tests, ultrasounds to detect tenosynovitis or tendinitis and such problems. And then from there, you'll make a diagnosis. And this is where the problem starts. As soon as you make a diagnosis, I'll explain later why I think this is problematic. And then after you have done that, most of our clinics do not treat. It's mostly a screening service that helps us identify people who need to be referred to the treating clinicians. Then in terms of referrals, we usually refer to orthopedic surgeons. And then, as you know, in South Africa, we have public and private healthcare service. I can tell you, and I see Dr. Mkwanazi is present, I can tell you that public service is usually a nightmare. Sorry for the lack of a better word. It's very difficult to refer this kind of injuries to a public service and get proper notification of occupational diseases, mostly because this is relatively a new issue that has been reported for the past few years or so. So most orthopedic surgeons will just, operate on the ganglion and not do much in terms of reporting. So the main issue is that they are not really being reported as IODs in public, and in private, we have another problem. Private orthopedic surgeons usually refuse to see this kind of problems. And as much as I understand, it presents a problem for us as occupational medical practitioners, because you have a person who's been diagnosed with an occupational disease that needs treatment, but unfortunately, the only person who's able to treat cannot. And reasons are often related to the compensation. Usually the doctor will see the patient and struggle to get his payment, and for that reason, they just simply prefer not to see them. This is another problem that we still need to deal with in our country. I've highlighted the issues that we experience as IODs. And then once the person has been successfully referred to a surgeon, it is very important to communicate with the surgeon, because we are able to determine what the plan is, and we are able to assist the employee further. Remember, this employee is going to come back to you in the clinic again, and he still needs to be placed at work again. He needs to be reintegrated back at work. And sometimes it's a problem because he comes with a splint or a bandage, and he's expected to work at the same time. So it's important to communicate with the surgeon to find out what can be done to accommodate the employee in the workplace. And then the other health professionals that we can refer to are once the operation has been done, some kind of treatment has been done. Excuse me, may I please ask whoever is not wanted to mute yourself?
Would Daniel have left you like that? Okay, thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
The next.
No, first of all, Daniel would have waited up until I got there and then heard. Yes, I said. Out there in the streets, my son, my own son, I said.
Okay. The next group of professionals that we normally refer to are occupational therapists, who often perform functional capacity assessments for us and are able to quantitatively determine whether the employee is fit to work or not. We often resort to them when we are facing the dilemma of where will the employee be placed Is he still capable of working or not? And they are also good with rehabilitating hands specifically. And then where you have access to biokineticists, you can also refer, especially for back problems. In my practice, I've seen biokinetics helping people with back problems successfully. I've also seen chiropractors playing a very important role in rehabilitating these people. In terms of the controls, you'll remember that the regulations mention that controls must be implemented and maintained. There is a concept of as far as reasonably practicable. This is the principle that we apply when we accommodate employees. You can't just say as the employer, there is no light duty and then expect everybody to understand. The important thing is that if as an employer or as the occupational medical practitioner or nursing practitioner in the clinic, you feel that the employee still has something that they can give back to the employer and the environment allows, and it will not be unsafe for the employee, recommend that these people are accommodated so that they can still contribute to the team. Remember, it's very painful and emotional because they got hurt at work, and sometimes they get emotional when you just dismiss them without even trying. And then the hierarchy of controls, as you know, it's elimination. If possible, we need to eliminate the risk or the hazard completely. And if that fails, we need to substitute. If we can't substitute, we have engineering controls where we isolate the hazard or prevent access or exposure to the hazard by constructing certain barriers around the source or the subject himself or the victim himself. Then from there, the most commonly practiced is administrative controls. When we rotate employees or when we manage shifts, putting stronger people at in certain positions, training people to do certain tasks correctly, and implementing policies. These are typical examples of administrative controls, and these are commonly being practiced in the workplace. Personal protective equipment is often not that useful in this instance, and as you know, it's the least effective form of control. But there may be certain few instances where personal protective equipment may help, like a glove or maybe a splint if you are trying to protect a joint or something like that. But usually these people would have been removed from the source and placed in a much more favorable position while they recover. And then the process of compensation is done on according to what we call instruction 180. Remember, from noise-induced hearing loss, we use instruction 171. There is a document called instruction 180, which is a guideline of how we are supposed to manage these work-related upper limb disorders in the workplace. I'll go through the process quickly. And then this describes, obviously, the definition of what work-related upper limb disorders are, how work-related upper limb disorders can be notified as occupational disease. It also outlines the benefits that employees are supposed to get. We'll go through them in a moment. And then lastly, we have these two most important forms. Colleagues, I have to be honest with you. The first time I saw these forms was after I had done the ergonomic risk management course or risk assessment course. Before then, as a medical practitioner, as a GP in private practice, as an occupational health medical practitioner for a year or two, I had never seen them. But I want to emphasize that there are such forms. They are called WCL 301, which is the first medical report that you fill in when somebody has a work-related upper limb disorder. In the next few months, we'll hold a clinical session on these disorders and be able to classify them and give guidance, what needs to be referred and what doesn't need to be referred, and issues to look into before you can refer such conditions. The WCL 302 is the progress and final medical report, just like we do in cases of accidents and other occupational diseases. Just a moment, colleagues. I just want to show you these forms that I'm talking about briefly. Okay, remember I spoke about the instruction 180. It's a government gazette document like this, which covers the definitions. That's the first chapter. And then it will also list the hazards that people are normally exposed to that lead to this work-related upper limb disorders, how the diagnosis is made. It's usually made by the medical practitioner. An important fact to mention is that with work-related occupational diseases, as opposed to occupational accidents that have to be reported within 7 days, once the diagnosis has been made by the OMP or by the general practitioner, that condition needs to be notified within 30 days. And this is where you refer to the orthopedic surgeon. And in my experience, it's often difficult, to refer without having made the diagnosis yourself or without trying to register the claim yourself. And often your claim will be rejected because when you go to the compensation funds offices, the people who are there are not used to handling this kind of injuries. They are used to just handling injuries, and injuries are an open book. They've been managed for a long time, but whenever they receive a strange claim on a strange form like this, I can tell you it becomes a nightmare. Then, colleagues, the document further describes what is an impairment in terms of these regulations, what are the benefits, and to highlight a few, there is a temporary total disablement, which would often affect the employee for less than 24 months. Then you have permanent disablement, which would affect the employee for more than 24 months. And then we have medical aid, where the compensation fund is supposed to provide medical aid for issues related to the condition that has been notified. So basically, this means the employees are not supposed to pay for themselves. They're supposed to be registered. The process is very complicated. You'll often get denied access to these benefits, but you can always appeal until somebody is willing to listen to you. I believe that in the future, things will get much better. And then the reporting, it's slightly more complicated than the injuries. With injuries, you get employer's report and then you just complete first medical report and done. Somebody gets paid, somebody gets treated. In this situation, there are multiple forms that need to be completed. We are talking about the WCL1 employer's report of an occupational disease. It's different from the other one. And then you have notice of an occupational disease and claim for compensation, which needs to be filled in by the sister typically, or the clinic. And then you as the doctor complete the WCL 301 that I spoke about. That's the first medical report. Sometimes you need to submit a W302 every month. And then on top of that, you have an exposure history. This is basically the motivation of what the employee has been exposed to. Without these other forms, the claim will be rejected. So you need to outline the exposure history, often supply additional documents such as ergonomic reports and occupational hygiene reports that specifically focus on ergonomics. And then when the employee is back at work, you have to complete the resumption report as usual. Here is the form that I was talking about. This is the first medical report. It's slightly longer than the one that we are used to. As you can see, it's 2 pages long, and then you have to describe the hazards that the employee is exposed to, and often the percentage during a shift. Say, for instance, a person that works 8 hours a day doing the same kind of job throughout the day with repetitive movements, you'll score her 100% of the shift. But if for some reason they bend over or they perform awkward postures, throughout the shift, maybe for an hour or so, you need to also indicate it in terms of the percentage. This is how they are able to judge whether the person is really affected by work or not. And then the progress and final medical report, slightly easier to complete, but you also have to do the same thing, document all the hazards that the employee is exposed to, in addition to the other documents that you have submitted. And then I think that's the end of our presentation, colleagues. I don't know if there are any questions. Are there any questions, colleagues?
All good on my side.
Okay. In that case, colleagues, I see. Okay, no, it's not a question. Yes, in that case, please feel free to send any questions through email or WhatsApp. We'll try to answer as many as possible. The ones that we are not able to answer, we will find somebody that is in a better position to answer such questions. And once again, colleague, I would like to thank you for being with us for this long. And we look forward to meeting you again next month on the 27th of March, when we will be handling health risk assessments. We have invited an occupational hygienist to give us his perspective of the occupational hygiene, during the health risk assessment, the part that is performed by the occupational hygienist. We have also invited somebody with a strong background in environmental health and safety, because normally when we do our risk assessments, it's usually the sister and the nurse and the poor health and safety person, rep or health and safety officer, usually gets grilled. Why are you doing this way? Why are you not doing this? How long has this been happening? And we often act as if they are not part of this risk management or risk assessment. But to be honest, they play a very important role in us being able to complete the risk assessment, having consulted their notes, their health and safety audits. So on the 27th of March, we'll forward more information about the session that we are going to have. And going forward, we are going to have a session every month. Last Wednesday of the month, we'll have a session where we'll be tackling the most important aspects of occupational health. Colleagues, we are very mindful of the fact that in occupational health, you don't only find occupational nurses and doctors. We have contributions from our colleagues, environmental health practitioners, occupational hygienists. We'll often have ergonomists where the company is able to afford. I just want to answer a couple of questions that I see popping up. Thank you, Bush Doctor, for your compliment. And Sister Lashiwe, this forms, Form 301 and Form 302, are available on various websites as a PDF. The copies that I have, I downloaded directly from the Department of Labor website. So you just have to say WCL 301 PDF on Google. And yeah, the the link will pop up, and then you can download that and keep it for yourself. But remember, in a government setting, and I'm assuming that I'm speaking to my colleague from the Free State, in the government setting, it might be a bit complicated for a normal medical officer to diagnose. And in that case, I'm saying I'll always be available if you suspect, to assist and help you maybe claim for such a problem. The biggest problem with RELTs, as we call them, or RALTs, is that you have an employee that becomes disabled because of the exposure in the workplace. But the fact that he was never notified as an occupational disease, he ends up being unfit to work, probably get bored to stay at home. And at the end of the day, he doesn't get the compensation that he deserves, that he should rightfully and legally receive because of his exposure to ergonomics. So this is a very big problem, and this is a countrywide problem, both public and private. If it's not properly documented and not properly motivated for, you are looking at an employee who's going to suffer at home without any form of compensation. And then the next question from Dawa Medical Solution is that what exactly do you have in your surveillance for ergonomics? For noise, we have audiograms. Is it the ergonomics questionnaire? Yes, doctor. Remember, most of the processes will start with the risk assessment. So if the risk assessment has been done, you will be able to establish that there is ergonomics involved in the type of work that the employees are exposed to. And then that will motivate you or influence the inclusion of specific ergonomics questionnaires into the program, into the medical surveillance program. So there are many online. The one that I use is designed by, I think it's OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Association in America. You know, most of the forms that are used worldwide are either partially or completely based on their programs. So the one that I recommend and the one that I normally use in my clinic or wherever I'm tasked to perform ergonomic risk assessment or medical surveillance is based on OSHA. If you send me an email, I'm more than happy to provide a copy. And then here is Sister Angie's response. I believe everybody has seen it. The basic ergonomic component is to either highlight ergonomic factors from the full occupational health history section that would have an effect on the musculoskeletal, I assume it's musculoskeletal capacity, neural functional capacity, and to the cognitive capacity. Unfortunately, without input of an industrial psychologist, these basic questionnaires are limited on the cognitive ergonomic impact. Okay, the answer is there. If everybody.
Dr. Mkwanazi?
Yes, sister, please go ahead.
Hi, sorry. I wanted to just add, yeah, sorry, I was trying to type and I thought, okay, now it's becoming a long story. But yeah, like you alluded to, it's we've got our ergonomic questionnaire, but it is going to be different from one industry to another because of the tasks that are happening in that industry. So as a team, we sit down and we say, okay, in our history taking questionnaire, we definitely need to focus on more questions on the muscular side of it, or more questions on the neural side of things. And then, unfortunately, what I find with a lot of questionnaires that have been designed, unless an industrial psychologist is involved, we tend to miss how deeply the cognitive ergonomics have had an effect, you know. So yeah, and then simple, so that's very much the qualitative data, and then we collect the quantitative data, simple things like the weight that this person started with, the strength, you can measure it with weight. This person was able to pick up 20 kilograms when they first started, and now a year later they're down to 15 with complaints in certain joints. So yeah, sorry, that's what I was trying to say here, but I don't think it quite came across. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, sister.
Yeah.
I think an important question that I might have left out is how many CPD points in this lecture? You will receive, and this is HPCSA CPD points, you will receive a point for every hour spent in attendance. And then in addition, we have designed a quiz. It's a 10-question quiz, basically multiple choice and true or false, that you can go to our website and complete. If you get 70%, you'll be able to receive another point for answering the quiz. I don't know if that answers the question. Looks like there is another question. Okay, that's Dr. Mkwena complimenting. All right, Ntibale Mohapi. Remember the WhatsApp number I gave you for the OSHA documents. Please WhatsApp the number. We'll be able to send you the link. I won't share the documents because I'm not sure of the copyright implications, but because they are freely available on the net, I'll be more than happy to give you the link to download for yourself. Okay, on that point, Sister Angie, I would like to give you a moment for closing remarks if you have. We have reached the end of our session.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mkwanazi. I think I learned a lot of new information from both of you. So yeah, looking forward to, as we said, this is just a quick overview of ergonomics. There's so much more to it, and I encourage everybody to definitely go and do a more intensive course and and get competency. Thank you so much for having me, everyone.
Thank you very much, Sister Angie. And thank you very much, everyone. We'll meet again next month. Anthony, I'll respond. Please drop me a WhatsApp. I'll explain how the CPD point system works. And once again, thank you very much to everybody who attended the session. Until we meet next month. Thank you very much, everyone.
Bye then. Bye.